This is episode 17. In the previous episode, we had covered till verse 2.53, and with that, we had completed the first three parts of chapter 2. In the first part, Arjun pleads to God to show him the right path. In the second part, God explains about the eternal soul or Dehina. Then, in the third part, God talks about the path of right action or Karma Yoga and how one should go about doing it. That was the summary of the three parts. Now we are in the last part of chapter 2, which consists of verses 54 to 72, that is 19 verses. In these verses, God talks about the qualities of a person who has achieved self-realization, sthit pragya. Today we will cover 10 verses, that is 2.54 to 2.63. Let's start off with the literal translation of these 10 verses, and then we will talk about some interesting things. Verse 54. Arjun Uvach Sthit pragyasya ka bhāsha samadhisthasya keshava sthit dih kim prabhashet kim asit vrajet kim. Arjun says, O Krishna, what are the qualities of the one who has steady intelligence? How does such an enlightened person talk? How does he or she sit? How does he or she walk? So Arjun is asking God on how does this person look like? How does Sthit Pragya look like? How does this person sit, talk and walk? Then verse 55 is Shri Bhagwan Uvach Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parth manogatan atmani ev atmana tushta sthit pragya tadochyate. God says, O Parth, when one discards all desires and cravings of the senses that torment the mind and becomes satisfied in the realization of the soul, such a person is said to be of steady intelligence or sthit pragya. Here, the soul is mentioned twice, Atmani ev Atmana, which means that the self is satisfied in the self or the soul. The dual usage of the soul is explained by Paramhans Yoganand. He says, your outer self or the egoistic self is satisfied in your inner self or Dehina. That is verse 55. Then verse 56 is Dukheshva anudvigna mana sukheshu vigat spriha veet rag bhai krodha sthitdhi munir uchyate. God says, one whose mind remains undisturbed and unagitated amidst misery, who does not crave pleasure, who is free from attachment, fear and anger, is called a sage of steady wisdom. Then verse 57 is Yah sarvatra an abhisneha tat prapya shubha ashubham na abhinandati na dveshti tasya pragya pratishtita. God says, one who remains unattached under all conditions and is neither delighted by good fortune nor dejected by tribulation, his or her wisdom is well poised, established and steady. Next, verse 58 is Yada saharate chayam kurmo anganiv sarvashah indriyani indriyarthebhyah tasya pragya pratishtita. Here God says, one who is able to withdraw the senses from the objects that attract them, just as a tortoise withdraws its limbs into its shell, is established in steady wisdom, and his or her intelligence is well seated. That is verse 58. And then verse 59 is Vishaya nivi vartante niraharasya tehina rasvarjam raso api asya param drishtva nivartate. God says, aspirants may restrain the senses from their objects of enjoyment, but the taste for the sense objects remains. However, even this taste ceases for those who understand the soul or spirit or God. This is verse 59. And then verse 60 is Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manah. God says, O son of Kunti, which is Arjun, the senses are so strong and turbulent that they can forcibly carry away the mind even of a person endowed with discrimination who practices self-control. In other words, the powerful and excitable senses forcibly seize the consciousness of one who is wise or has a high degree of enlightenment. Next, verse 61 is Tani sarvani sanyamya yukt asit matparah vashe hi yasya indriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. God says, one who has subdued their senses and has kept their focus on me is established in perfect wisdom, and their understanding is well poised. Next, I will read verses 62 and 63 together. Dhyayato vishayan punsah sangah teshu upajyate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho abhijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibhrama smriti bhranshat buddhinashat pranashyati. God says, one develops attachment while contemplating the objects of senses. Attachment leads to desire. Unfulfilled desire then leads to anger. From anger originates delusion or clouding of judgment, which results in bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, then intellect gets destroyed. And when the intellect is destroyed, one is fully ruined or destroyed. These were verses 62 and 63. We just did the translation of all of these verses, and now I will talk about a few interesting things. You might notice that in all of the verses of self-realization, God repeatedly talks about the one having control of their senses, or the one who's peaceful, or the one who's at equilibrium is said to be of steady intelligence. This description can be of someone who is able to achieve Shashvat Shanti, such as Lord Buddha or Guru Nanak, who were able to achieve eternal peace through Gyan, Dhyan or Karma Yoga. That's the definition of self-realization or Sthit Pragya in all of these verses, and it is important to notice as God is describing the meaning of realizing Him and what it will look like. That's the essence of these verses. And the remaining 9 verses of this chapter will also talk about the same topic. I would like to quote 2 verses together, verse 60 and 61. Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschata indriyani pramathini haranti prasubha mana tani sarvani sanyamya yukt asit matpara vashe hi yasya indriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. God says, even for one who is striving hard, their senses are so powerful that they end up seizing their consciousness forcibly and cause them to lose self-control. Whereas one who has subdued their senses and has kept their focus on me is established in perfect knowledge and has his understanding that is well poised. Now these verses are very similar to another famous verse, which is verse 35 of chapter 6, wherein God says, Asanshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasen tu kaunteya vairāgyena cha grihyate. Here God says, O great warrior, which is Arjuna, without doubt the senses are powerful and difficult to control. But by practice and restraint, these senses can be controlled. Practice and restraint together make perseverance. So action cannot be without perseverance. And it cannot be niruddeshya or without objective. Nih kaushal without skill, nih yatan without perseverance, or nirbuddhi without rational discrimination. Verses 2.60 and 2.61 are explained in a more powerful manner in verse 6.35, and I repeat, Asanshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasen tu kaunteya vairāgyena cha grihyate. Practice and restraint are important, as karma is not possible without them. Karma has to be with perseverance. Nihsang or nishfal karma doesn't mean that action should be without perseverance. God also says that one who's focused on me or attached to me, what does it mean? What does matpar mean? Paramahansa Yogananda says belief is a necessary condition but not a sufficient one. God here is talking about having focus or belief in Him, as belief is a very powerful word. For example, when somebody is ill, it is said that one believes in the medicine or the doctor, the impact and healing tends to be better on the unwell person. Belief makes a lot of difference. So the interpretation of matpar in this case is that journey becomes easier for you if you have belief. Without the absence of belief, the journey is tougher. But what is the mat in this matpar? Who's this mat? Who's God? Who's me? The reality is that you could interpret mat in matpar as you would like to, in a physical form or in an unmanifested form. Shashvat Shantim Adhigachati. You could consider Matpar as eternal peace. That's also okay. Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. If you understand excellence in work or attaining true knowledge, that's also Matpar. All of these could be objectives of Matpar. Physical form, unmanifested form, eternal peace, Chidanand, Karmasu Kaushalam, or any other form. You should follow that definition of Mat that you feel is right. The discussion on Matpar and similar usage is a repetitive thing in the Gita, and you will see it in subsequent chapters. God says, for example, give or surrender all your actions to me. And this me could be anything. It could be a physical form, unmanifested form, Shashvat Shanti, Karmasu Kaushalam, the best of the best of the best. There's a lot of discussion on this from chapters 7 to 11. That's where we will stop today. I hope you liked the discussion. Thank you.